cool.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next industry guest talk. Our speaker today is Robert Wilkins. Say hello to Robert, everyone. So, Robert is an FX artist at Weta Digital. I think it's 3 years, almost 3 years that you have started your position there, but you have been promoted into that um, position quite fast. That means how passionate and talented you are. So I met Robert in Wellington in Pitch Fest. He pitched an amazing project about monsters, huge monsters, roaming around, living their lives, and the amazing story. And he's been shortlisted among the three. So and there I really loved his pitch. He was so passionate, so enthusiastic about not just like the technicality of it, but also the creative side of it. So that's what I loved about. So that's what I told him, like, you should talk to my students. He's gonna talk about this more to us. You have worked on the last avatar on the liquid simulation workflow, and you've been part of the team that made the simulation 2 times faster. Thank you for doing that. um,
You're welcome.
enough of me introducing. I'm gonna hand it to you, and you tell us about your journey. Um, Let us know some insights about what's the everyday life of an FX artist may look like, and any advice you may have for our um, students.
Fantastic. Well, first off, I want to say thank you very much for having me. It's a big honor to be here, and I'm new in my journey, but yeah, I don't know, full of enthusiasm. I think I got some stuff to share that hopefully is useful. Yeah, let me just kick off my screen share, and then we can crack into it. So, is that coming through all right? It's always good to
Yes,
check.
I think if you get a little bit closer to the mic, we can hear
Sure.
you even better.
Hello, hello. Yeah.
Yes, fantastic.
Okay. Cool, cool, cool. Yes, so I'm Robert Wilkins. I'm currently an effects TD at Weta Effects. Been there for coming up on 3 years now. It's been a wild ride. I'm very, very excited to share. So, in my overall journey, here's the outline for the presentation. So first, I'm just going to go over how I got into effects, like the life events that led me up to this, what life is like when you're actually working in an effects house, just a bunch of assorted nuggets of wisdom that I've picked up along the way. And then I just want to end on like a kind of hard won lesson that I think is quite important. So first off, we'll just start up with everything that led up to me joining Weta. So I was born in England. When I was 6 years old, I moved to Perth, and then I was 15 years old to move to New Zealand. But all of this was in a South African household, so I don't really know where I'm from. But there you go. So ever since I was young, I've always had this bent towards mastery. Okay, whatever I wanted to do, I just knew I wanted to be really, really good at it. There's this story of when I was just learning to walk where I didn't have the hang of slopes yet. So I walked up and down this ramp for like 45 minutes until I finally got the hang of it. And eventually I just turned to my mom and I was like 9 months old. I just nodded and we went back inside. So I've always had that kind of inclination. And I spent a lot of my teenage years actually not knowing what I wanted to do. I had this like aptitude in a lot of different areas, but I didn't have my direction. And I knew that I wanted it with like my whole heart. So eventually, when I moved here to Wellington, I did some courses at the UB School of Design. Maybe you guys have heard of it, but it was just a bunch of introductory things in like graphic design, animation, filmmaking, all that good stuff. I went to the one here in Wellington, which was thankfully run by some ex-Weta employees, and they started talking about different roles in the industry. So it was things like a lighting artist is focused more on the artistic side, where they have to shape the characters and bring out the mood. And then you have animators, which are also very artistic. It's a whole discipline, takes years to master, all that good stuff. And then the presenter was like, "There's this mystical unicorn, which is this merging of technical ability and artistic ability." And the moment I heard that, I was like, "Okay, that's what I want to do. That's where I'm going to be. That's what I'm shooting for." So throughout these year and a half at UB, it was a lot of surface level stuff. Like it was really good. It was practical. It was like how to click through the buttons and get a result that you needed. But I was always left unsatisfied. Like how does it work? How does this thing work and then this thing work all the way down? Like why is it like this? And I was grappling with this, and I knew I wanted to be an effects DD, but I wasn't sure what the best path was. And looking at like a few more years of UB surrounded by these people that weren't as passionate, I kind of just went to one of my instructors who was an ex-Weta employee, and I asked him some advice. And he said the biggest thing from his life that he took away was to seek the deep knowledge, right? Don't just get the surface level. Don't just try to like skip past the complicated bits until you have the result you need. Actually understand what's going on, because in the long run, it helps you so much. And I've been living by this ever since, and I can attest that it is so helpful, like really learning it. And so I left UB. I decided to do a course at university. I kind of started from scratch, and I was like, okay, I'm going to learn this from the ground up. So I went to Victoria University. I got a Bachelor of Science with a major in computer graphics. This was a perfect course for me because it had this meshing of math and C++ and geometry analysis and solving large linear systems with Cholesky factorization and all this great stuff. But at the same time, I could still snap up every creative course, every course on the VFX that I could at the time, and just like keep learning and growing. So throughout this time, my I realized I did want to be an effects artist. That was still the goal. It was still this like crazy dream of maybe one day if I really try, hopefully I can get into Weta and do all the stuff there and work with the people that built Lord of the Rings and Avatar and all that. But that was such a pipe dream. But throughout my time there, I kind of realized that it's not just about effects. It's not just about this one area, although I still wanted to master it with everything I had. It's about just the ability to make things, right? I have these images, I have these wild imagination in my head of the stuff that thrills me, and I want to make it and I want to share that with people. So after I finished my undergrad degree, I was kind of toying around with doing some post-grad computer graphics stuff and really learning even more the depths of it. But by that point, I knew I'd come into this to be an artist, and I was like, okay, everything that's not making things is just making me sad. So halfway through, I switched to this Master of Design technology, which is run by these incredible Oscar-winning industry vets who've been working at Weta and various other studios for like 20 years, and they had all this rich, beautiful wisdom, and it was just like a year of solid diving into Houdini. So that's what I did. And before I even finished the course, I got job offer to work at Weta. So for me, it was just like a really great timing because uh, the well, I'll get into that in a second. So the second part of this presentation is, of course, what it's like working in an effects house and kind of what my journey was there, and then what it's like overall. So how I actually joined Weta was part of the Effects ATD program. So Weta has this entry level program called the Assistant Technical Directors, and typically they're a department that works across the whole shots realm. So that's things like comp, lighting, the R&D departments that maintain the code, like all that sort of stuff. There's this standalone ATD department, and they take these like very junior level people and they loan them out to the different departments. You get all of this training in the different departments, you get all this experience. Their goal as a program is to take local New Zealand talent, people that have just come out of university, and then give them a pathway into world-class VFX. So it's like the perfect thing. Now, typically you get put into this pool of ATDs and then you get loaned out to different departments, and you have to like hope one day that you make it into the department that you want to. But because Avatar was so huge and had so much water stuff going on, that they hired a special generation of ATDs that were just for effects. And so we were brought in from the ground up to go into the effects department. And so we received like 2 months of just training and lectures and investment from the effects department as we got all these people that come in and share wisdom and teach us all these things about the pipeline, how it works end to end. It was incredible. So the reason that they did this special intake for the ATDs was because there was this menial task that had to be done for every single water shot in Avatar 2. And as it turns out, there are like thousands of them. And so we were there at the start of the show, staring down the barrel of thousands and thousands of like hundreds and hundreds of hours of working on this menial thing.
So it
And
was just 10 of you, right? It was just
yes,
10.
yes,
Oh, geez.
yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, but something that we found at Witter is that if they are so open to the better way of doing something, because it just like they're fully on board and fully behind of if you can find a better way to do it, then just go ahead and do it. So we were all sitting there and we are getting our first talk about how to do this menial task. And a few of us just looked to each other and were like, you know what? I feel like we could automate this. And so we got together, we asked for some permission, we got together a little task force, the four of us. We sat down, we looked up all the different APIs like Python, all that good stuff. Um, on how to, and we split up the roles into you take this part, you handle rendering, you handle ingesting it, all that sort of thing. And we came up with a tool that automatically does it. And so from that point on, it meant that our team was freed up to be able to do all the fun stuff like simulations and actual cool tasks. And yeah, the amount of support that we got from effects was truly, truly incredible. The head of department was behind us. We had these leads and seniors come in and teach us give us this like download of all the knowledge we needed to make this tool, and it was absolutely incredible. So since then, I just kind of like learned everything I could about the pipeline, about all the different APIs there at Wetter, about the different tools that they've built over the years, about Houdini, about PDG, about ways of automating, just like everything I could, just hoover of all the knowledge. And then over my time on Coral, I kind of ended up building these automated workflows, like these PDG templates that would take a task that took 7 people a week and turn it into one person taking a day. And suddenly, one person could handle an entire sequence, and they would just farm out first iteration of like 50 shots at a time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I would strongly say, especially for something like Avatar, where there's so much work to get through, that automation is possible and very much worth it. So from that point, I was doing like a little bit of shot work on plant and that sort of thing. And over time, I was just in the right place where I could stick my hand up for little tasks on the water tool set. Just be like, someone needs to take care of this, and I just stuck my hand up as like, hey, I'd be happy to try. And even though I didn't have all the expertise and the knowledge, they were like, thank you for wanting to, and I'll help you through this first one so that you're able to do it from then on. Um, and so over that period of just like developing the tool set, I ended up taking this particular piece of like low hanging fruit where we knew that this area would needed a bunch of optimization in terms of our rendering, but no one had come fully to grips with how to actually work with it. And the person that was supposed to be doing it left the company, and so they try to hand off their stuff to some other leads and seniors, and they try to like understand it. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna I'm just gonna dive in and figure it out and just learn it top to bottom. And so I contacted the PhDs on the sim team, and I was just like, "Hey, do you have time to answer a few questions?" And we just hopped in a call. It lasted like a few hours, and I just got this download of everything I needed to know. And so yeah, from there, I already had permissions for adding it to the tool set, so I just kind of like implemented the technology. I was given a bunch of time away from tasks so that I could actually work on it. and that ended up being for water planes specifically, halving the render times, which was really, really exciting. And then from then on, that we had this like weekly meeting where we would give training sessions. Usually it's like leads and seniors, but then me there at the time, a junior, just kind of like said, "Hey, this is useful. Maybe I could teach everyone about it." And they were like, "Sure." And so I put together this presentation about all the different about how it works, and the algorithm behind it, and how to use it. And then from then on, I would just get recognized in the parking lot as people were like, "Hey, I know you." It was really cool. From there, I did some shot work and a bunch of problem solving. And then by the time the film got released, I had worked my way up to being like one of three people in the company that actually had permissions for merging and releasing new versions of the water tool set. And that's kind of my role now, is like being an expert, which is exactly where I want it to be. And then at the end of the Avatar process and the award season, Weta was kind enough to bring out over the awards and say, "Here's some pictures of me holding the Oscar, the
Oh,
VES, and the
beautiful.
Annie Award for Avatar." Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah, very exciting, very
Did you
exciting.
take them home?
No,
Ah,
unfortunately,
you should
I'm
have.
pretty sure I'd be assassinated.
You really are. You really work for it. Yeah. At least one
Yeah,
of them. The left one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Can I spare one? I mean, they've got so
Yeah.
many.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of my journey and how I ended up where I am. So I thought I would just go over a little bit about
That was
what life
wonderful.
is like. Oh, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, yeah, just what life is like as an effects artist, as a TD. So the first thing I want to introduce you to, because this is not something I knew about before joining the industry, is that there is a brand of people called production. And what they do is they are the front lines. They are the body block between you and all the stress of the deadlines. So you as an artist are given very specific tasks, and production people take care of the communicating between departments. So if before I can do my water simulation, I need to have the animation finished, for example, and I also need any models or colliders that I'm working with to be in the layout, in the shot, all ready for me to ingest. So there's this big pipeline that happens, and so the how long each step is taking, how long it's supposed to take, any delays, all of this stuff gets. You have this whole sort of group of people that are just communicating between each other, and all of the stressful things like this is far behind or my guy needs his thing right now, they are just there in the background having these incredible these like heated discussions by themselves, and then eventually they kind of turn around to you and say like, "Hey, how's it going? What's the ETA on this guy?" And it just fully shields you from all the stress. They are treasures. They are absolutely essential. So my advice to them is be nice to them always. Make very good friends with your production person. Try to make their life as easy as possible. Another thing that really struck me at joining the company is that um, there is a lot of support for juniors, right? It is not expected for you to be able to know everything. Like they start you off on small tasks and they help you along the way. It's a very, yeah, it's a very realistic set of expectations on you, and the amount of help, especially on Avatar, I think is just the amount of like team building and coming together and just the investment of time and help into us juniors was like truly incredible, like really really awesome. Yeah, and so tying into the whole like list of tasks and that sort of thing is that we have a task management system called Shotgun. What it has is just like your everything that every shot that you're supposed to do and every task you're supposed to do on those shots, and then due dates. And to again make the life of your production person as easy as possible, it's really difficult to know exactly how long something's going to take before you start, even the experts. And so you just have to be in constant communication with your production person and just give them updates. This is going to take longer. This is going to be finished early. This is going to be fine as long as I don't get no notes and all of this good stuff. So communicate early and often is the advice. And I thought I would just briefly go through kind of the nuts and bolts of how do you do a task from start to finish, because it's surprisingly relatable. Like it's not actually that alien and scary once you get the actual the the steps down. So step one is you just hop into a call with your supervisor, and they'll give you this kickoff meeting where they describe exactly what the task is, what templates you can use, who you can contact for advice, just like we need this plant to wiggle in the background, or we need some foam to pretty up those rocks where the shore is, and we don't want to do a full sim, all that good stuff. You then just launch Houdini. You bring in all of those inputs, like your environments and your characters, everything that you need to simulate on. Then typically you load up either pre-built tools and templates that people have devved over many years, or that have been set up by like senior artists. You can then just like run that out, or tweak it a bit, or fix some things, or set up your boundaries, all that good stuff, and just like give that a run. Or if it's a totally bespoke task, you just make something in Houdini. Just use the notes with those inputs. Um, if you're involved in the super early stages of a project, then you'll be the one setting up those templates. But that's typically like for seniors and all that stuff. So once you have your setup of like a first pass of my simulation, you just like do an iteration. And so that just means I need to take the shot, what it looks like at the moment, and just render it out with like a previs, flipbook, mantra render, playblast, that sort of thing, and just submit it to my daily session. So the daily session is every day. Your effects team gets together. You put your work in front of the supervisor. Supervisor's like, okay, this is good. Can you fix this part? Can you just delete those points because they're a little distracting? All that good stuff. On Avatar, there was quite a big hierarchy. So the effects soup would talk to the VFX soup, and then you'd get some like rounds of notes, and you do some iterations there. VFX soup would then bring it to Joe Letary, and then maybe Joe Letary has some notes, and you do some more rounds of iterations. Then Joe Letary would bring it to John Landau, which is James Cameron's producer in Avatar, and then maybe he'd have notes, and then you do the effects soup, then the VFX soup, then Joe, and then back to John Landau, and then eventually you would maybe make it to Jim, and then if Jim has a big note, then you can start that all over. So it was it's a heck of a process to actually get a shot through on something as huge as Avatar. But typically, yeah, when those come back, you just address them, and sometimes it's like this is just the wrong direction, or sometimes can you pretty this part up, or maybe you do a render and it's like there's this problem here, there's like a visual artifact, like a seam in your blends, and you just give those a fix. So once you've done those iterations, and you eventually get the go sign, which is approved for publish. And so this is where you deliver all of your stuff downstream. In our case, typically to lighting, where they'll actually render everything and then make it into pixels. And then pixels goes to comp, and then comp goes to the final clients where it gets all finally approved. Yeah, and so that last step of approve for publish is you take out all of your individual elements and you cache them into their own separate bits, and then you package them up in such a way that it makes sense in the pipeline. You do some test renders using the lighting setup so that you know that when they render it, it'll work. And yeah, then that's the finished task. Sometimes on smaller shows, especially for things like magic, where there aren't pre-built ways of delivering. For example, something like water will have its own developed set of palettes and all that stuff. But if it's something magical and you're doing all of the shading and lighting yourself, then you can also just do renders in like Mantra or now Karma, and then deliver those straight to comp as well. But that's just kind of like the start and finish, yeah, of what a task is in effects.
Beautiful.
So yeah, it's cool. Yeah. So next, I thought I'd share some nuggets of wisdom that I've picked up, some things that I've done that have really helped me succeed. Um, None of this is no particular order or anything like that. So I'm just gonna like go through them in isolation, and hopefully you pick up something useful. So I think something that really helped me as a student was I really did not care about grades, right? UB didn't have grades, and then by the time I joined university, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so it's especially in this industry, it's not about the getting an A or being the best in your class or anything like that. Like none of that is the goal. The goal is to get knowledge, is to get better, to accrue things, to actually learn. And
Did you hear
it
that?
yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
it's a formula. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't know. I I let go of of trying to be the best in a particular room a long time ago because I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to make things. I wanted to take what I had in my head and put it out there. And I knew the standard I was shooting for is way beyond where I was supposed to be. And so often that's the thing I was shooting for. And so it doesn't matter. You're not trying to like tick off the boxes. You're trying to learn. And so sometimes that means, doing the thing that you want to do, or like using a tool that you've been wanting to learn just so that you can grow in it. And if it means like using the assignments to your advantage, like I want to know how to automate things or how to do a simulation, and so I'm gonna take this assignment and then reframe it in such a way that lets me learn this skill. And then at the end of it, it's not about if it's a like that you're judging the result not against it's important to like judge it in kind of like isolation. I don't know. This a whole all this comparison stuff is just been like painful, and I just want to yeah. It's much better to just like want to be the as good as you can, try to hit your goal. Yeah. So it's something else that I've learned is that there is a big balance between learning it and doing it. So something I kind of want to hit home, and I'm going to go over this a few times, is that when you come up against something you don't understand, it's actually really important to sit there and grapple with it until you do. So there's this weird error. This thing is not working. I cannot understand why my points are just exploding when I do my sim. It's just some arcane thing. I've tried restarting my computer. It doesn't change anything. Okay. Clearly there's something about this that I'm not understanding. And I'm going to sit here in the tough bit and just grapple with it, change the inputs, build it from scratch, do it from all different angles until I finally understand what's going on. And one of the beautiful things about Houdini is that typically it is related to your lack of understanding. So every time you can do that and spend that time, you grow in it. And you actually grapple to the fundamentals, like what is actually happening here, how does this actually look, and your model of what things are doing starts to expand and get richer and deeper and more solid. Now that time of debugging and learning and grappling with the problem is uh, is at a cost of just like brushing over it, or kind of just like bodging it or hacking it together, and you don't really know what's going on, but it looks like it, but it still works and it looks okay in the end. So your ability, that is still a valuable skill. The ability to kind of bodge something and just hack it together until it looks okay is a necessary skill in the industry, and you will be using that on a daily basis. But every time you skip over understanding something, you're eroding your foundation. So there's a real balance here. So every time you're tempted to just kind of like skip past something or not really debug a problem, just have that in the back of your head of like, but I actually do need to understand this. And I do need to spend this time. And so balancing those two things is absolutely very, very important. And it ties into the next point, which is just like learn it from the ground up, the fundamentals, the foundation. One of the beautiful things about Houdini is that it doesn't hide anything from you. All that anything in VFX is ever is here is my data. I'm doing an operation on it, and now it's a new form of data. And Houdini shows you the before and the after, and it gives you detailed explanations of what the operation is. And typically, if something's going wrong, you're either misunderstanding the input, the operation, or the output. Um, and so yeah, just get that deep knowledge, that understanding. How does this work? How does that work? How does that work? All the way down. Yeah. So that the I skipped over a point there, which is that part of the learning and the growing here is that you something that really helped me is that in the back of my mind I always had this ongoing question of like there must be a better way of doing this, right? I'm sitting here, I'm having to type in the values 16 different places. I'm having to like manually draw or animate to fix this part. I cannot stand manual work. And so it's just like there has to be a better way of doing this. And again, it takes time, but spending that time and being okay spending that time to figure out and look for the better way of doing this means that at the end of that process, you have really good ways of doing things. It was to the point where there's these little tips and tricks about Houdini where I'd be annoyed at something and I'd go and I'd look it up, or I'd watch a ton of tutorials and absorb things. And maybe in a tutorial there was just one thing I learned, which was this thing I'd always been looking for, of a better way of doing this specific thing. And now that I finally had it, it's like in my database and I'm going to be using it. And those little tips and tricks, there were seasoned veterans at Weta who I was actually teaching some things to, because they've been added recently, and I just picked it up in this accruing of knowledge, in this constant search for the better way of doing this. And I found, working in the industry, that that same attitude of there must be a better way of doing this is just as valuable, if not more valuable, to apply to something like tasks in the pipeline. So, for instance, that menial task that we've been doing, right? I couldn't even help myself. Like, there must be a better way of doing this than us sitting there by hand doing it manually for 2,700 shots. And it turns out there was, and it freed us up to do all this other amazing stuff. And then all those automated templates that I built that saved hundreds of hours, all of that was looking at the problem, staring down the barrel of me having to do this task 20 times in a row, and thinking, I'm just going to do this in the general case and then solve all 20 at once. And there's a little bit of, you're trading off doing it one by one for that task, that time in the start to build that automation. But once you have that, you can use it for the rest of the movie, for the rest of time potentially. So it's yeah, it's worth it. Like, for something as huge as Coral, the the cost benefit analysis was like overwhelmingly but worth it. Yeah, so taking that attitude, there must be a better way, and then actually pushing towards it. Something else that became very clear as I joined the industry is that problem solvers are in extremely high demand. So that ability for you to work through your own problems, to debug things, right? To come up against a wall that's just not working and be able to chip away at the outside or try it from different angles until eventually you figure out why, and then you can move past it. That is in extremely high demand. For the last section of Coral, sorry, Coral is the, I don't know how much I've been saying that, but Coral is the code name for Avatar over at Meta, Coral 2. So for the last section of Avatar, um, I was more valuable just jumping from scene to scene, solving problems where people would be like, "I'm desperate. I need to get this out." And since I'd done so much of this problem solving and I had this expertise in the tool set, I could just solve it immediately. I'd be like, "Okay, you need to do this thing. I'll rig this up for you. Done. Next one." And there's the need for those technical people is absolutely present. And any skill that you can build in that area is guaranteed going to be incredibly valuable. And another thing that really struck me about the industry is that um, it's not that you need to be incredibly fast and productive, although that's absolutely a thing, and for small shows especially. But on something large like Coral, where they have so much resources and it's about allocating all the tasks so everything is reliable, the most important thing isn't necessarily being super fast, like being able to get it done in a day. It's actually just being able to do it to the schedule, to being on time and being reliable about it. So if I say, okay, it's been bid for 5 days, I reckon I can do it in 5 days. And every time you do it in those 5 days, you become this like stalwart stone person that the production people can rely on. Like, I can trust Robert to do his thing. I don't have to worry about him. Don't have to chase it up. I can just rely on him. And that is actually incredibly valuable than like big ups and big downs. So it's kind of like marathon, not a race, and like reliability and really getting the experience to know how long something is going to take you. Yeah, and it also, it's a bit of a relief because you don't have to. There's this enormous pressure to like. I put this enormous pressure on myself to get it done as quickly as possible, and it's okay. Things are allowed to take time. It's just about like communicating that and being reliable. So yeah, just an extra interesting thing I noticed. So then this ties into everything I've been saying, which is the next part, which is uh, the I think becoming an expert is another incredibly valuable thing. So, for example, the the technology I built about this one aspect that no one understood but we could get big benefits from is this perfect gold mine of no one, like this part that people find arcane, or this tool set, or tools that people don't realize that exist. If I can learn them, then I've gained like a superpower. Uh, yeah, I'll go over that a bit. But yeah, I don't know. Once you find those arcane things that other people shy away from, just try and find some time to like sit down and grapple with it and experiment with it and find the documentation, attack it from all different angles, and try to break it and try to figure out how to use it. Find examples. My little team of FXATDs, we found out where all the code is stored in the Weta database, as you could just go through and just start learning through all the different examples. And once you have those extra skills, it's this incredibly satisfying feeling because it's like gaining a new ability. It's like a superpower. Like no one else in the company could do this, but I can. For example, one of the things that first kind of got us noticed and uh, what allowed my team to kind of have this investment for doing pipeline stuff and automating things is that I, totally independent of any instructions, I overheard that they were wondering about what is the status of all these different packages, and it was really difficult to know if something was good or if it was broken. And so I just sat down and I figured out a couple of different APIs for the Python stuff. And then suddenly I could troll the database and spit out a spreadsheet of all the different products and whether or not they were valid or invalid. Um, and so now I just have this incredibly useful piece of information. And I, as the head of the effects department was leaving, I just kind of sheepishly stuck my head up and it's like, hey, is this maybe useful to you? And he was like, yes, absolutely. And that's where the whole team of effects ATDs kind of started getting investment for developing. So I don't know, every new thing you can pick up, every new unknown part, I think of it like painting there's this picture of how everything is going on, and there are parts that are just brushstrokes. Like I know roughly what's going on here, but I don't actually know what's going on here. And I think the big advantage that I've had my whole life is that I'm really conscious of those parts that I don't fully understand, and I'm not satisfied until I do. So it's not like I have to drop everything and then research it. It's just that there's just a part of my brain that's always looking out for what is the detail in this rough area. And because once you know it, you don't know how it's going to be useful, but it is going to be useful. Okay, so the next one is going to be very sad for a few people in here, and I know it's very scary, but I just wanted to like give a brief recommendation for, and it's learning to code. So I'll just preface this by saying I sat down with a couple of members of my FXATD group, and over the course of like 2 or 3 days, I taught them how the foundation of coding works, how all the basics, and we like built a tool together that became an automated thing. And so these people that had no idea how to code, over the course of just like a week or so of grappling with it, and suddenly they also had the ability to build up these workflows, and they went on to build even more automated tools. And actually the effects ATDs, we ended up developing a bit of a name in the company. It's like renowned, like, oh, the effects ATDs of Coral are absolutely killing it. And this is part of the reason why, is like this growing in skill and helping each other. But the so it doesn't have to be incredible knowledge. You don't have to learn everything from scratch. But at the end of the day, there are more computers at this point than humans. And what coding does is it allows you to solve a problem in the abstract. So instead of having to literally click through the buttons on every shot to fix the thing and then move on to the next shot, what I do is, okay, I realize I have to click these buttons. I can write down that formula in one line after other. And for Houdini, it's literally dot click button. Just put those in a row, and then suddenly I can just run that for every shot. And so now I've solved the general case, and I can just have the computer do this problem for me. And that's an incredible power to have. And yeah, like I say, a little bit goes a long way. Like learning dot press button is not going to bend the brain. And like the coding as a field is this vast topic, and there are people that specialize their whole lives in it. You actually don't need any of that stuff. There's just this tiny few basics that you need. And the benefit is that it's very modular. So as you need the new bits, you can just pick them up as you go along. Like, oh, I don't know had to loop over a list or something. And so you just go and you figure out that little piece, and now it's in your toolkit forever. Oh, I don't know how to build a class, or I don't know how to work with this particular API. Well, I just have to learn that as I need it, and then I have that new skill. So I don't know. I encourage people to just invest, just have a look in specifically Python. Python is everything works with Python, and all pipelines are built based on Python. So uh, just being familiar with it in the basics, and then having in the back of your mind, even if you don't know how to code, keeping in mind that the sort of problems that you can solve with coding, and keep an eye out for them, because as soon as you find one, then you can just learn the basics and then solve it, and you become this incredible asset on the team, kind of thing. So that's my little encouragement. So another thing that I've picked up, that has been very helpful for me, is that, I don't know, just saying thank you, just being grateful, and then expressing it, and just being brave enough to just kind of like, this person invested, they spent like 2 hours with me, and they taught me all of these things. It's a they're very busy people, and they're experts, and they wanted to, but it was a sacrifice, and I'm so grateful. I've been helped so much over the last 2 years, in like in time investment, and in trusts, and opportunities, because when you're young, when you're just a junior, you're untested. They don't know if they can rely on you to deliver this thing when they give you this task. And so that's a leap of faith on their behalf. And so it's a really, I think it's just really awesome to just be grateful about it, just to say thank you, just send that message, be like, you're the absolute best. I really appreciate it. And doing so more often than not, they'll the way it's worked for me is that they've just warmed to me because of it, and have built up these amazing relationships as a result. Okay, so this next piece of advice is something I actually got at MDT, so the Master of Design Technology, that postgraduate thing I did. So big shout outs to Rocky Iterato. So this is something that they've learned over their 20-year careers, that they've been passing down to their students, which is that you can have a professional practice, and that's your job and your work, and it's great. But then it's easy for you to lose sight of your artistic practice, your creative one, your personal thing. Like, yeah, it's so easy for it to take over. And the reason that you got into this as an industry, that you became an artist, is because you have this spark in you. You have this thing of like, I want to be able to make things. I want to be able to take this brilliant thing in my brain and put it out into the world. And even when you're employed, and even when it's all crazy, just making sure to have some time to spend on that personal creative practice outside of work. Because another big thing about the industry is that you're working towards someone else's vision, and you're working to exactly their vision. And it's like in a lot of ways, it takes a lot of the pressure off, and it makes it like very doable. It's just like, whatever you say, like, you want it that way, I could do it that way, no problem, you got it. And that's very well and good, and it's reliable, but it's not the same thing as the stuff that you do at university, where you have this project, it is from your own creation, and you want to bring it into the world. And so after you sort of join the industry, I think maintaining that creative spark is incredibly important. Now, a lot of people will say that personal projects are valuable because they keep your skills sharp. This is absolutely true, like learning new pieces of technology, all that good stuff. But it's more than that. It's like sustaining. It kind of like takes the part of you that wants this, and builds it over time. I think it helps keep that spark of joy alive in you for many more years than if you just kind of like went with the work. And that ties into the next thing, which is that uh, like, doing personal things on the side is all very well and good, and it really, really is. But you just have to be really careful about burnout. Um, like, this is something that's been growing in awareness in the industry, and there's been a lot of support in the effects department, from management and all that, about being careful about this. But um, every time you stay up late, the whole 2 a.m. push, as you try to get this thing out before the next day, or before the weekends, the lighters can do it, or before this deadline. Every time you have that huge all-nighter or whatever, it has especially when you have to like work every single day, it has a genuine effect on your productivity. Like you can just, it becomes so clear that the next day I'm just kind of like useless. And over time, when you work 50 hours a week or 60 hours a week, over time it will wear you down. It just will. And you have to be careful because the VFX world is just a massive machine that just like churns out stuff, and it will keep on taking. Like it won't. It's not. Some people in there will try to be concerned, but the only one at the end of the day that can really tell it how far is too far is you. And so you kind of have to draw your own line in the sand. um, yeah, when we started out on the team, we had a lead who was taking care of us, and he just gave us this talk about, okay, 40 hours a week is sustainable, and that's what normal jobs work. When you're at 50 hours a week, which is what Weta kind of asks for you when you're on a show, 50 hours a week will wear you down over time. It just will. 60 hours a week is when things get crazy, is when your that decline becomes quite sharp. And then he kept going, and it was very scary. It was, and 70 hours a week is when you start to make mistakes. 80 hours a week is what you do to fix those 70-hour week mistakes. 90 hours a week, and you just start to get crazy. And I was like, okay, calm down, please stop. But yeah. At the end of the day, you just have to like, you have to know your limit, and draw that line and just make it clear, because they will be supportive of it. I can't take on this extra task. I'm sorry, I've run out of hours or something like this. Like it's if you're clear on your firm, they'll absolutely respect it. And uh, yeah, another piece of advice related to this that I haven't got down here is that um, you're a contractor. At least at Weta, you're a contractor, and so that means that there's no scheduled holidays. There's no even public holidays. You have to schedule those yourselves. You're just working all year round, all the time. And there's 2 weeks at the end of the year where the whole sort of building is shut down. And then apart from that, you're just kind of working. And if you do that, you will just get exhausted. So another big piece of advice I got was, you just have to book leave. You just have to say at this point, like at the start of the year, halfway through, I'm going to take a 2 week holiday. 2/3, I'm going to take a 1 week holiday, and then I'm having a Christmas break. And if you do that way at the start, then they can't turn around and ask you not to, because like, hey, this has been in the books for a very long time. So yeah, just book leave. It's a very, very good advice. Okay, so then the next thing I want to talk about is just some really hard-won life advice. Yeah, I think it's worth sharing. So this is something that people don't typically know about me, right? I'm this very passionate, very energetic, very enthusiastic person, but that's not me my whole life. That's not me all the time. Actually, just this wholeheartedly pushing towards something. It's a difficult thing, and I think all of us run into this. I throughout university, I just came to the end of myself over and over again, and I was stuck in this. I was so obsessed with trying to be great that all I could do was look at my work, look at where I was, look how long this thing took me, look how unproductive I am, and just see all the areas in which I was falling short of this thing I wanted to be. And it hurts. It just hurts. It's just a painful thing. And like I have gone through various ways of dealing with this kind of like tension of trying to be good but not being there yet. There was times when I would like I'd like whip myself against those areas where I fell short just on the inside, and it got to the point where I'd be like physically flinching every time this a thought came up of an area where I fell short or something didn't happen. I'd try to like hide that I was struggling in the hopes that people wouldn't notice. I'd just bury myself in distractions and just fervently hope that no one realized just how badly I was doing. And then, of course, many, many times, just in the arms of my family, crying. And I'm a big believer in crying. It really, really helps. So all those coping mechanisms, all those things that you do that are causing you pain, that are like you're struggling with, I advise you to just take a moment and seriously examine them and ask yourself, is this actually helping? Is this actually filling me with joy? Is this actually working? Is it actually getting me to be better. And if you're like me, the answer is it doesn't help at all. This enormous pressure on myself to be great, as all it does is fill me with dread, and it makes the whole thing a slog, and it's a fight to do anything. And I just realized through over and over that the best thing to do is just get rid of it. Just say no. And I think the reason that we hold on to those things that hurt us for so long is that we have a part of them that we believe in. Oh, if I stop being hard on myself, then I won't be productive, then I won't be good. And what I've learned is that well, my family says that there's no truth in a lie. If the thing is hurting you, if it's robbing you of your motivation, if it's sucking the life from you, then there is no part of it that is good. And you just get rid of the whole thing. You just walk away from it. And the way it works is that it's a slow rewiring of the brain. That thought that you constantly think that just batters you down, it pops up in your head 100 times a day. Well, then at the start, 100 times a day, you just firmly say, no, I'm not thinking, I'm not dealing, I'm not engaging with you. And at first it's 100 times a day, but then it's 80, and then it's 50, and then it's 20. And soon enough, you stop thinking like that, and your whole being is just lighter and better. It's the and it's not just about walking away from the thing that hurts you. It's also about finding the thing that works for you. So for me, this enormous pressure on myself to constantly be great, and just the devastation I felt whenever I fell short of that. If instead of that enormous pressure, as soon as I lift that off myself, as soon as I walk away from that, I realized, oh, wait a second, I'm doing this because I love it. Oh, wait, I actually like grappling with problems and finding solutions and learning things and getting better and making stuff. I actually enjoy it. It's actually what I want to do. That's why I'm doing this. And so, free from the pressure, I have the new way that's kind of like that builds me up instead of tears me down. And like I don't know, it's a difficult struggle, especially us as artists. We have this self-doubt, and we always judging our work harshly, and it's a brutal thing. But I just want to impress upon you that it actually doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't. There's a better way. There's a brighter future. There's a process that doesn't tear you down, that isn't a bitter struggle, but actually brings you joy and life and goodness. And I urge you all to walk towards that thing. It's a difficult process to go through because it really requires that self-awareness. We actually have to sit down and take the time and examine how you're feeling and why you're so miserable, and figure out what it is that's dragging you down, and then to look at it, to find the things that make you afraid to let go of it, and then just be brave enough to make the decision to try and walk away from it. I'm terrified that being hard on myself is going to lose productivity. I have to let go of it anyway because it's just not working. It's just bringing me down. It's just not worth it. So it's a process that requires some discipline, some self-examination, some real time, and then big bravery. It's a big choice to walk away from them because we hold them so close, which is why they hurt so much. And but that big step is difficult, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Genuinely.
Beautiful.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. So awesome. Thank you very much for
Oh,
having me, letting me share. Really
thank you so
appreciate it.
much. Let's have a big applause for Robert.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much, Robert. And thanks for sharing your personal journey as well. It was heartwarming and moving. I just wanna like before I go back to asking, I took a lot of notes
Oh
before
yeah,
me
great.
go back and asking questions. I just wanna like when you talked about the vulnerabilities and like all the hard things you went through, you talked about. I just want to add to it, to my
Yeah,
students, that
please.
like um, reach for help and ask for help.
Mm, yeah,
There are a lot of um, resources out there, counselors, your friends, your parents,
yeah,
your yeah. So
absolutely.
yeah. So we all have been there, and
Yes, yes.
thank you so much for sharing that. So, any questions, guys, before me? Yep.
Fantastic. I love questions.
Hi, Robert.
Hello.
Uh, First, I want to thank the amazing advice and journey that you share with us. Thank you.
Thank you. No
Uh,
worries. My pleasure.
I have like two technical questions about Avatar 2,
Oh
and
yeah, sure.
because
I'll
I
see if I
watched
can
the
answer them.
film for a couple of times. Because I noticed that the water sim in Avatar 2 seem to be like some liquids kind of low resolution. Is there like a
Interesting.
deliberate like artistic choice, or it is because like the storage cost from you guys? Because I feel
Yeah,
like even though it's kind of low risk, but like you guys did like other simulation apart from Flip, so that makes the final outcome still look amazing. So I
right.
just
Yeah.
wondering, yeah.
Yeah, great question. Great question. So so storage is absolutely a huge thing, and near the end of Avatar, they were deleting petabytes of data like every week to try and keep up with the storage costs. So that is a factor. But actually, the bigger factor is time. At the higher resolution, if you double the resolution, it's going to take, because it's cubed, 8 times as long to simulate. And that means every iteration, if it's wrong, it's 8 times as long to fix it. And so it's, yeah, the big factor when it comes to resolution is actually time it takes to work through it. Um, yeah, there are absolutely areas in which we just ran out of time. I mean, we have an email which is like the 3 weeks before delivery where like only 1,300 shots to go, and it's just like, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to do this? So some parts do have to suffer a little bit, unfortunately. Um, so yeah, that is a part of it. But another thing that was really cool about Avatar is that um, we could run different resolution sims in the same shot. So one of the areas that we innovated on is thin film, where you'd have the very fine liquidy that streams off the characters, that sort of thing. That is actually just a flip sim at a very high resolution and high substeps that you just pay a lot of time to run. And then you can combine that with your low resolution bulk water, and then you can do some upresing in areas where you need to, and all that creative stuff. So yeah, some things will be low res and high res, and our job is to try and figure out how low res can we go before people start noticing. Yeah, cool. But yeah, great question. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I also have a question about like, I saw like a part of like cocoon hunting, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
they have like pretty amazing wave simulation, and I want to know how animation department works with you guys, because I saw like these animation which
yes.
contain like interaction with waves, like that's pretty amazing. Like how you guys able to do that?
That
And
one is really interesting. That one is a lot of time and effort. So, so they developed a GPU way of defining a water plane that people could run on stage. So when James Cameron's doing the virtual photography thing in real time, and so we were able to take those wave generations and then port those over into Houdini and then do the simulations based off those. So animation did have a real time representation of the water that they could animate the boats off of. But as soon as you run that into a simulation, it changes. So what we ended up doing was something called parallel workflow, where we would do a low res first pass of what the simulation would look like on the simulation side, on the effects side, and then we'd see how that looks with the current boat animation. And then typically we'd have one where it's like going way too deep and the water spraying everywhere, or it's like hovering over the top, or the wake of one boat is affecting where the other boat should go. And so we take that low resolution sim, we package it up into a way that animators can real time scrub it again. We port it back over to them. They do another pass at the boats, and then we do another low resolution sim. And it kind of goes back and forth 2 or 3 times. And then we'll land on like, this is a good animation. It's going to work with the sim. And then we can crank up the resolution and do the final effects work. That took a long time. It took a long time of the back and forth because every time you do an animation pass, it's another few days. Every time you do an effect sim, it's another few days, and it's like a few artists working across a bunch of different shots. So it was both the technology we built and a lot of time and effort, which is actually a recurring theme behind why things look good on Avatar. Yeah, cool. But yeah, great question. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you so much, Robert. That's all my question.
Yeah, fantastic.
Anyone else? Anya? Usually
I know I usually have questions, but I can't think of any right now.
Okay. So, I have a question that might help my students. Where to start learning coding? What's the
Okay,
process there? Yeah. Okay. Is there
interesting.
any? Yeah.
Um, I don't know if I have up-to-date resources on this, unfortunately, but there are so many pathways to learning the basics. I would say though that the Houdini API is probably a really good place to start in terms of
Mm,
you can start immediately applying the coding. And if you drop down a tab inside of Houdini, there's something called the Python shell, and you
mm,
can actually just like click and drag parameters into the Python shell, and it will give you the programmatic reference to it. And then you can just start saying like dot press button or dot set to this value and that sort of thing. And then you can very quickly start building up little scripts that will actually help you. For example, there's a dot render in the RUP network for actually like
mm,
writing out a cache. So what you could do is dot set resolution to 10 or my velocity multi to 10, and then dot render, and then dot set it to 5, and then dot render, and then dot set it to 3, and then you'd get like a wedge of and change the version number each time. And then suddenly with one button click, you've got 5 versions that you just ran out overnight, and you
mm,
can kind of compare all the differences. So I think, yeah, the a really the best way to learn coding is to start applying it really, really early. So there are amazing websites that will take you through the basics of like how to assign a variable, all that good stuff. And I think Google will help you more than I can there, unfortunately. But the advice would be just to start trying to actually use it as quickly as possible. Yeah.
that's a great advice. That's a great advice. Um, this is for my curiosity, like how much of PDG, because I just started learning about it. How much did it help? Like, is the new PDG mindset helping at all?
Yes, great question. So it's one of those things where like there's a few people that know it really well, and then they have that superpower of being able to use it. So the way that we use PDG is that you put down a node. There's like one node in there called Python snippet, and what it does is it just takes in, or Python processor is the one,
Mm,
takes in a bunch of different work items and then runs a code for each one of them and then spits out, and you can change the attributes on it and then you spits it out each time. So that is suddenly a bridge to everything inside of Weta. Like you can query databases, you can open up scene files, you can actually like launch renders in different applications. All of that stuff is available through Python in the command line. And those things are accessible to you through PDG. And so
mm,
suddenly, uh, instead of having to like close down Houdini or launch up other applications, then load everything that you need to and do the same thing over and over again, from within Houdini, you can have this like tasks launcher center where you can like hit go, and then across a bunch of different shots, potentially, it will fill out your same formula and then do the QC renders and then sub them and then submit them for dailies all automatically. So yeah. It's a lot of Python processes because that's what hooks into the rest of the system. But in particular areas with particular types of tasks where you can build out the automation for it, and if you build your templates very specifically, PDG can be an incredible time saver, especially on like smaller shows where you have few people and lots of shots. So, yeah, it's great.
fantastic. Any questions before I ask the last question? Anyone? Okay. I have one
Yeah.
last question before we finish tonight with this amazing talk. This is again for my own curiosity. I'm doing some research with engineering department on computational fluid dynamics. So basically,
Okay.
like Reynolds
It's interesting.
averaged, Navier-Stokes formulas, and like how like, but the approach over there is all about doing simulation as accurate as possible, that is as close as
Yes.
possible to the tow tanks. I'm working on a small trimaran kind of
Mm,
simulations. So
yeah.
how much of the water simulations you do in Weta is close to the what happens in the real world, or is it just like you guys just more curious, like concerned about the look of the simulation rather than the accuracy
Interesting.
of it?
Very, very good question. This is actually something that I've been trying to extract from our simulation department for the last few years. It's like, where does the barrier between the VFX simulations that we do cross into CFD in the world of the scientific community? And the answers that I've got is that we do use the same math and the same formulations, like the same fundamental principles. I think it's that CFD will pay the cost to model all of the extra forces. So, for example, something like surface tension, we discovered that including it in your simulation is only actually useful once you get below a certain size in your voxels.
Yeah.
And so when we're doing our big simulations, we just don't even bother including it, because paying the extra time for the voxel size, and then also as you increase the voxel size, you also need to increase substeps for stability. And those, so suddenly the accuracy that you're paying for is not hundreds of times what you would if you wanted to fully properly model it. It's hundreds of times what you would do if you were just looking at it from afar. And so I think like we use similar math. This is my guess at it. We'd have to ask the simulation guys, but I think we use the same math, but we don't pay for. But like our barrier for good enough is way, way lower because it just
Okay.
needs to look right. And it's also worth noting that we're working in an environment that isn't fully dedicated to physical reality. And so if your inputs aren't physically real, like the animation isn't perfect, then your outputs are just not going to be physically real. And so you have to hack it away until it starts to look real. But then more than that, you start handing it through those chains of people who approve your shots. They all have their own idea of what it would really do there and what it would really look like. And your goal is to address their notes, not to hit physical reality. Like you don't just turn around to James Cameron and say, "You're wrong."
You're
I'm not gonna
physically
do
wrong.
it. Yeah. I refuse. so yeah, there ends up being an enormous amount of skill used to like hack it together to look right, and it's not all based in physical reality. Avatar did that way more than anyone else, and still there's an element of artistry involved. So yeah.
Fantastic. So I'm gonna follow your nuggets of wisdom, and I'm gonna be very we are very grateful and thankful about this amazing talk you had for us, and we wish you luck for your future. You're rocking and rock more.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
I
Robert.
appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Have a lovely
Have a great
evening.
day. Yeah, you
Bye.
too. Awesome. Bye. Bye. Thank you very much.